President Nicolas Maduro's latest attempt to fix Venezuela's crippling inflation crisis, increasing the minimum wage by 50%. The wage is going up to 40,000 bolivars a month. That amounts to around $60 at the official exchange rate, but just $12 on the black market. It's the fifth increase, which has now seen the wage rise a cumulative 322% since last February. Maduro says this will protect jobs and income.
As long as there is this war, we will continue with a bold, just, and necessary policy to seek harmony and balance of employment and income.
But opponents say even this dramatic increase won't give people enough to live on and will lead to further inflation and job losses. Venezuela's economy has been spiralling since a drop in global oil prices in 2014. And the situation is desperate. Inflation is in triple figures. Huge price increases and shortages of basic food and medicines have people at the mercy of the black market. And looting has become common. Plans to pull the 100 bolivar note and issue new 500 to 20,000 denominations have faced delays, adding to the chaos.
Last night I had to pay 5,000 bolivars in bills of 100 to be able to buy some flour to be able to eat. They didn't accept the 100 bills. These don't function. You can't eat with that.
Venezuela's opposition is desperate to remove Maduro from power. It has now passed a resolution saying that Maduro has abandoned his post, failing to perform his basic duties of governing the country.
The resolution shows that the only way to solve the serious problems afflicting the country is to return power to the people of Venezuela.
The opposition has been pushing for a recall referendum to force new presidential elections, but its attempts have been repeatedly blocked by the Supreme Court. Maduro says enemies abroad are to blame for Venezuela's problems.
The irritating and null manifesto, which lacks any form of effectiveness and which was approved by the gang in the National Assembly yesterday, is a manifesto representing a coup.
With Venezuela's crisis deepening, will Maduro's new measures be enough to fight off his political foes and bring the country's economy back from the brink of collapse? Yvette McCullough, The Newsmakers.
Joining me now from Washington, D.C. is Michael Bainey. He's a senior political risk analyst at the consulting firm Allen & Associates. He specializes in Latin America. Thanks so much for joining us, Michael. So raising the minimum wage by 50% to combat inflation, is that a bad idea?
Yeah, it's almost a meaningless gesture, to be honest with you. They've now raised the minimum wage 5 different times in the past year. But inflation is so high, it's in fact the highest in the world, that it's almost certain that within a couple months they'll have to raise it once again, because as soon as they raise it, it becomes almost worthless. So what it's at right now is on the black market only about $11 a month anyway. So
yeah,
it's really just a meaningless gesture.
Yeah, and I'm looking at some horrendous stories coming out of here. Been following AP correspondent Hannah Dreyer. She's got stories of people giving up their children because they can't afford them. Food shortages, widespread looting, gangs roaming the streets. The IMF says inflation is going to reach 1,600% this year. How else can this government stop the country from this economic free fall?
It's actually pretty hard to see exactly how they can move forward. Right now, what their problem is that they have price controls that make it almost impossible to make a profit in the country, currency and capital controls that make it almost impossible to repatriate that profit, even if you do happen to make one. And so it's almost impossible to do business in Venezuela. They could get rid of these systems, of course, but the government has become so wed to them in its rhetoric, in the actions of it, in its actions for the past decade, that it's very hard to see them completely changing course, although they obviously have to.
Yeah, you mentioned the government being wedded to it in its rhetoric. Maduro blames economic war and mafia attacks, as he calls it. What does he mean exactly, right. And might there be even a kernel of truth in it?
Look, Venezuela's problems are caused by Venezuelan policies. It's certainly true that the United States has poor relations with Venezuela, but the idea that that's the genesis of its economic problems is false. He claims that there's all sorts of speculative attacks against the currency that's being carried out by mafias in Colombia and the United States. But the fact of the matter is, the reason the currency is worthless is because they're printing up tons of it, and there's almost nothing being produced in Venezuela right now, apart from oil, the price of which is way down. So, the problems really lie with the Venezuelan state.
Right, and based on all the available evidence, in your opinion, is Chavismo and the Bolivarian socialist revolution in Venezuela, is it dead?
I don't think it's entirely dead, to be honest with you. In addition to the economic crisis, there's also a political crisis. And as we heard, the National Assembly just recently voted to declare that Maduro has abandoned the presidency. But Maduro holds a lot of cards in his hands. He certainly hasn't respected that, and the Supreme Court has already struck it down. So he could hang on, and he could hang on until the end of his term. I think that's possible. But for the revolution being a model that anyone in Latin America would want to copy, I think that is dead. That was once the dream that we could almost unite Latin America under this banner of Chavismo, but that dream is dead.
Mm-hmm. Troubling times for the people of Venezuela, no matter where they stand on the political spectrum. Michael Bainey, thanks so much for joining us.